Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Sohaila Bano with 94803 Emergency Preparedness Alliance. We are so happy and grateful to have our Mayor, Tom Butt, tonight to talk about Point Molate, what has happened in the past, what's the possibilities for the future, and answer your questions. Mayor Butt, please.
Okay, let me close my door. My dogs are barking.
Sure, no problem.
So thank you for the opportunity. So Point Molate has become probably the most divisive subject in the city council over the last several years. And I go way back with Point Molate. I was elected to the city council in 1995. And back then you took office the week after the election. So I was sworn in sometime in mid-November 1995. And at the first meeting, one of the votes we took was whether or not to pursue having Point Molate transferred to the city of Richmond. If we had not done that, they would have simply sold it to the highest bidder. And so we started something that has now gone on for almost 27 years. And I guess a little short history. So sometime around the year 2000, the city decided to put out a nationwide request for proposals for a master developer of Point Molate. And originally there were as many as a dozen, and some of them were unqualified, and some of them didn't have the economic horsepower to do the project. And the number kind of got whittled down to 3 or 4. And ultimately those 3 or 4 sort of congealed into one proposal. And that proposal was to build a destination resort that included a casino at Point Molate, and the casino would be qualified to be located there because there was an Indian tribe involved. So the city essentially entered into a contract that was more like an option than a contract. But over the period of several years, the developer paid the city about somewhere between $15 and $20 million. And during that time, they developed the plans for the destination resort project. And went through the CEQA review and so on and so forth. And I had originally supported it because it was kind of an ambitious project. It wasn't just a casino. The casino was almost a smaller part of it. It was going to have a performing arts center. It was going to have retail and commercial and really bring a lot of life and create a lot of jobs in Richmond. But as the project proceeded, after several years, they kind of changed. They changed their approach, and it went from being a destination resort that was kind of a very ambitious project to basically just a casino with a parking garage for 4,000 cars. And at that point, I soured on it, and I joined other city council members who ultimately rejected the project. And that was around 2010, I think. And in 2011, the would-be developers of that project brought a lawsuit against the city of Richmond. and they alleged that the city had breached their contract and had not followed through with the commitment to sell the project to the city. And after, I can't remember what year it was, but not too long thereafter, a couple, 3 years thereafter, the lawsuit was decided in court entirely in the city's favor. The court decided that the city did in fact comply with the terms of the contract, that the developer had no rights to develop it, and it was 100% victory for the city. And then the developers appealed it to the California Appellate Court. No, actually, at this point, it was I think, yeah, this was all in federal court. So they appealed it, and it went from the federal district court to the Ninth Circuit. And one of the elements of the appeal was that the city did not comply with the requirement for good faith and fair dealing, because even though the city council had approved the project at one time, then Mayor Gail McLaughlin was out lobbying Senator Feinstein and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and maybe some other folks to, she was lobbying against the project and wanted them to do whatever they could to stop it. And the Ninth Circuit said that that she was acting on her own, but she was representing herself as speaking for the city. And so the Ninth Circuit said that there was substantial evidence that she had violated the obligation for good faith and fair dealing. So whereas the city had won 100% the lawsuit at the district court, the Ninth Circuit sent it back to the district court. And it stayed there until 2018. And in 2018, there was a mandatory settlement conference in the district court. And there were 3 of us on the city council who attended at the time. It was Ben Choi and me and Otto Racinos. And we were there. We were not empowered to make a decision for the city council, but we were on an ad hoc committee that was going to try to represent the sense of the city council in case of a settlement agreement. So ultimately, kind of at the last hour, we were successful. We entered into a settlement agreement with Upstream and the Gitaville Indian tribe, and essentially the settlement agreement said that that the city would have 4 years to sell the project, to sell the developable areas in the project, and would have 2 years to entitle them and 2 more years to sell them. And if the city failed to sell them for any reason, then the tribe and Upstream would have the option of buying them for $100 per development parcel. So there are 4 development parcels there. So that amount would be $400. So during that 4-year period from 2018 to what is going to be May of 2022, the city did, in fact, the city put out an RFP, looked at several potential developers, selected one, SunCal, and ultimately, and SunCal submitted applications for general plan change, rezoning, design review, so on and so forth. And the city ultimately approved all those and entered into a development agreement and a disposition and development agreement, which is sort of a sales agreement with SunCal. And that agreement was scheduled to close on May the 21st, which is a little less than 2 months from now. So everything was kind of going according to plan and according to contract. Now, during this time, the city council flip-flopped. It became controlled by the Richmond Progressive Alliance council members, and they, for reasons that I may get into later, but I still don't fully understand, they're dead set against developing Point Molate. And they did some amazing things through this period of time. Oh, okay. By the way, the anti-Point Molate development group has brought 2 lawsuits trying to stop it. They brought a lawsuit claiming that the city violated the Brown Act, and they brought a sequel lawsuit, and the city has won both of those. One at the state court level and one at the federal court level. So the city's batting 100% in terms of defending the decision on Point Molate. So kind of the last piece of the puzzle, a very common tool used in development is called a community CFD, Community Finance District. And it essentially pays for infrastructure with fees imposed on the new owners of a development. It's very commonly used. And the development agreement and the disposition and development agreement between the city and SunCal required the city to cooperate with SunCal in establishing a community facilities district. And so we were right at the cusp of doing that. And there were 2 steps involved in it. One of them was the city had to adopt a resolution of intent to do that. And then a month later, they had to actually establish it. So what happened at our last city council meeting is that the city council declined to adopt the resolution to establish the community facilities district. And that was kind of like the nuclear option. I mean, it was kind of unprecedented that something like this would happen. And so what happens now, we don't know. There are 2 scenarios that could play out. One of them is that SunCal could decide to go ahead and buy the property on May 21st, and they would pay the city. They would pay $45 million for it, and the city would split that with Upstream and the tribe. So the city would get $22.5 million, and Upstream and the tribe would get $22.5 million, and the project would be off and running. Now, without the community's facilities district, which is essential for financing the infrastructure, SunCal may decide not to buy it. And if they do, they're probably going to sue the city. And if they do sue the city, they'll probably win. And it could cost the city $50 to $100 million if the lawsuit plays out and we ultimately lose. So it's a huge risk. So the next thing that might happen, and probably will happen, if SunCal doesn't buy it, then Upstream and the tribe will buy all the developable parcels for $400. And they will inherit all of the entitlements that SunCal had. So and then they have 5 years to sell it. If they don't sell it in 5 years, then it flip-flops and goes back to the city, and there's still a split. But But so they have 5 years, so they could just sit on, so they could do several things. One is they could just sit on it, do nothing, wait and see what happens. And meanwhile, it's probably going to increase in value. The other thing they could do is they could cut a deal with SunCal to sell it to SunCal, and SunCal could go ahead and develop it with the entitlements they have. And let's say they decided to sell it to SunCal for almost nothing. Since they only bought it for $400, they could sell it for $800 and make 100% profit. And they could take profit out on the back end. You know, they could cut a deal where they actually get additional money when units are sold or something like that. So with SunCal not having to spend 50 or $100 million on infrastructure, they don't need a community facilities district anymore. They could finance the infrastructure some other way. So what's the impact on the city? Well, first of all, the city would not get $22.5 million. Second of all, they'd be stuck with all of the maintenance and security costs for Point Molate for as long as the next 5 years. And these costs run about $1 million a year. Third of all, the city will get sued. They'll end up spending millions of dollars on attorneys. And if they ultimately lose the lawsuit, it's going to cost them tens of millions of dollars. There's just no scenario here where the city, you know, comes out ahead on it. It's just a really bad deal. And that's kind of where we are. I think the big question is, why did the RPA controlled city council do this? And I don't really know. You know, for a long time, they've been obsessed. You know, they talk about save Point Molate. Well, you know, the plan that's been approved calls for actually saving 70% of Point Molate as open space, including a waterfront park that runs the whole length of the shoreline there. So, and then, and so I don't know really. And again, I said for some reason they're obsessed with the idea that there should be no housing at Point Molate. So that's kind of where we are. And I think we're in deep trouble. And as I said before, there's no scenario that really offers a benefit for the city at this time, unless for some reason the city council decides to reverse course, and that's not easily done because they've already missed the deadline, and you know, they can't go back on that. So you know, the interesting thing about it is that I get a lot of email and a lot of communications. There's a lot of talk on social media, on Facebook and Nextdoor, and you name it, about Point Molate. And I have to believe that about 99% of people just don't have a clue. They don't know what the history is. They don't know what the legal obligations of the city are. They don't know what the downside of where we're going with it is. They don't know what the risks are. And they talk in kind of platitudes like, yeah, let's save Point Molate, or yeah, you know, I don't really think there should be a development at Point Molate. I think we ought to do blah blah blah. So I'm going to stop at this point and just see if people have questions. I probably missed something, and I apologize for rambling, but we've got a real problem there that the city council's put us in.
Thank you very much for giving a picture in summary. I have two quick questions before others ask questions. You mentioned somewhere at least $1 million per year. What is that about?
No, the cost of maintaining Point Molate is about $1 million a year. You know, the city, up until recently, the city was paying for both security and landscape maintenance there, mainly just, you know, cutting brush and weeds. And now when the entitlements were granted to SunCal, they took over that. So they're now paying for at least security, and I think maintenance also. But the total cost of those two things is about $1 million a year. So if SunCal doesn't buy the property, then the obligation to maintain it goes back to the city. So the city's going to be stuck for $1 million a year for maintenance until something happens out there.
Excuse my ignorance. If there's nothing there, what security expense are we talking about?
Say again.
If there is nothing in there in Point Molate, what is the security expense for?
Well, there are a lot of buildings there, historic buildings.
Okay.
All those historic buildings are part of a historic district listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And in the past, there's been a lot of vandalism there. But there was a time between the time that the Navy left and the city kind of really took seriously their obligation there. The vandals went into all those buildings. They stripped out all the copper wire, and they did a fair amount of damage. And the city finally put in some credible security. And so Point Molate has been safe from vandalism now for several years. And then the other part of it is landscape maintenance. There's a lot of flammable brush out there, and there's what used to be lawns around the old Navy housing and that kind of thing. So that has to be cut and maintained on an annual basis, if for nothing else, just for fire prevention.
Thank you. One more question, if I may. And that is, when we were looking for grants for our El Sobrante Community Park, we realized the magnitude of the budget for East Bay Regional Park District. Is it possible that they purchase the land and turn it into a park for us? So the city benefits from the money for the purchase and also gets to have a park.
Well, you and I haven't discussed this, but we've been emailing about it. And
no, I'm talking about Point Molate. I'm not talking
Point
about
Molate. I thought you were talking about
no. That's a separate discussion, and we'll keep emailing you about that separately.
One of the things that the anti-development group at Point Molate keeps saying is that somehow some money is going to be raised and the East Bay Regional Park is going to buy it. And I don't think there's any indication that that's actually going to happen. City staff has been in contact with the East Bay Park District continually, and they've continually said that they're not prepared to buy Point Molate. What they have said is that they would be willing to consider becoming the manager of the 70% of it that's open space, if in fact the project ultimately goes forward. So we've got the waterfront park, we've got the Bay Trail, we've got the uplands, and they've always expressed an interest in being maybe managing that, but they've never actually made a formal offer to do that. They've certainly never made a formal offer to buy Point Molate. And it's probably legally impossible for them to do it. First of all, as long as there are vested rights in either SunCal or the Upstream and Tribe, there's no legal way they could actually buy the development areas in Point Molate. They could buy the 70% open space. And there's another item that most people are surprised to learn. There's a state law that came from SB 330 that was passed in 2018, I think. When people were starting to realize we had a housing crisis, and it bars cities from either downzoning properties that were zoned for residential use, or taking any kind of action to stop residential use from happening there. So all these people that have this wild dream of turning Point Molate into a park, there's just no roadmap of how we get there. It's just a fantasy. And again, a park, 70% of it is designated open space. So that can certainly happen. But the developable parcels, there's just no roadmap to turn them into a park.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the mayor?
I see a hand up. Oh, no, I don't. That's my hand.
I guess we all don't know enough details to ask
There's one.
questions. Oh, okay, Gary, go ahead, please. Gary, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, I cannot hear Gary. Gary, if you have a question, either write it in chat or unmute yourself and ask your question.
You can't find the button. I have that problem myself a lot.
Okay, well, while Gary's finding the button, so to make sure I understand it right, East Bay Regional Park says they are willing to maintain the park if it's given to them. But the city needs to make it a park, right?
Well, they really haven't gotten that specific. They just said they're interested. Now, the way the development agreement was set up with SunCal would actually have the obligation to maintain the park. So presumably they would pay the regional park district for maintenance. If SunCal doesn't buy it, then I don't know if the park district is willing to maintain it, or that they have the funds to.
Okay, very good. There is a question about you not voting the other night, and two members of the city council were absent. They're asking why you did not vote.
Well, I was in Yosemite and I had my laptop, and I was connected to a Wi-Fi system, but it just wasn't working well. And so I couldn't participate. I couldn't fully participate in the meeting. So I didn't choose not to vote. I just couldn't do it. They
Okay.
called this special meeting, and I said, look, I'm going to be in Yosemite at the Civic Well, which used to be the local government commission conference I go to every year. I said, I probably can't participate in the meeting. I'll try. And as it turned out my camera was broken on my computer. I got it fixed eventually, but that's why I was unable to vote.
Was it a special meeting they're asking? Or regular meeting?
It was a special meeting.
Okay.
We met on Tuesday, and they were supposed to vote on the community facilities district on Tuesday, and they instead voted to call a special meeting for Friday and put the vote off until Friday. And by that time I was in Yosemite and my computer was broken.
Okay, thank you. Gary, can you ask your question now?
Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so Tom, according to what I read in the court settlement, the city had to do everything to help the developer complete whatever he had to do. And this thing you talked about, the facilities development agreement or whatever, was part of that. And a while back, the judge was ready to haul the city council in to ask them what they were talking about when they were acting like they didn't want to cooperate. Now that they've actually done something, aren't they in contempt?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if one or both of the parties of interest, either SunCal or Upstream and the tribe, go back to federal court and ask the judge to have a contempt hearing on this. And because clearly they are, they have breached the contract, and they've breached the orders of the federal court. So I don't know where this is going to go, but it's,
Well, I mean, the judge herself was calling them in So why wouldn't the judge call them in now when they've actually,
Well, I hope she does. I was disappointed that she didn't follow through. I think her rationale at the time was that, there's some really weird stuff going on here, but the city technically has not actually, breached the agreement yet. And so
right, at that point, they hadn't done anything, but now they have.
they have, right. And I wouldn't be, I mean, I got one way or another, this is going to be back in federal court.
Yeah, well, I was hoping the judge would move a little faster than that.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. It's a real problem.
Thank
So
you.
is there any scenario where this whole thing goes away?
Um,
I mean,
well,
there's two serious issues on the development. One is the access road, and the other is there's no sewer.
well, this is all like old news. This was all addressed in the environmental impact report, and dealt with there. The people in opposition to Point Molate brought a sequel lawsuit. They brought up all these issues, and the judge said that they'd all been resolved and dismissed the case. So,
So did the original agreement require us to put a firehouse out there?
yes.
I mean, the city can't afford a firehouse.
Well, the developer was going to pay for it.
Yeah, but
We
who's
have,
gonna staff it?
we're gonna,
We
Sorry,
can't
go
afford
ahead,
to pay
Kelly.
for the staff.
we have some questions in the chat exactly related to the same issue, actually, to the cost. So Serge is asking, I've heard that the parcel financing fees may pencil out to be prohibitively expensive relative to one can expect for the properties, like for sewer, fire, police stations, etc., the infrastructure costs. What do you think about it?
Well, the city has retained multiple consultants who have looked at that, and they've all said that it works. They've all said that the economics work. Now, the people who are opposed to it, they went and hired their own consultant who said it doesn't work. So you got it's kind of like, who do you believe? And again, this.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. I think I muted you by accident. I wanted to unmute other participants.
Okay, there you go. All right. So
Sorry about it. Go ahead.
oh, no, that's okay. So I don't know where where I got cut off, but the city has hired multiple consultants who've looked at the economics of the project, and they have all concluded and provided detailed information showing that the community facilities district is viable, that the economics of the project are viable, that the projected sales prices of the units are viable, and that it's all going to work. And we have the Point Molate opponents who have hired a consultant who has said that it won't work. So that's kind of where we are. It's like, who do you believe? And I choose to believe the city's consultant, not just because they're the city's consultant, but I pay some attention to what's happening in the real estate market around the shoreline, and what the opponents are saying just doesn't make sense. I mean, they're saying things like no one would ever buy a living unit out there. It's too near Chevron. It's only one way in, one way out. It's no one would ever want to live there. And they wouldn't pay $1 million for a unit to live there. And we've looked at looking at recent, and so the time that those units are going to come on the market, is like 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So, but right now, people are buying units and they're buying condominiums in and around Point Richmond for over $1 million. And I gave one example in a recent e-form I did. Just down the hill from where I live, somebody bought a 1,500, no, 11, they bought an 1,150 square foot house on a 4,000 foot lot with no parking for over $1 million. And if you figure it out, that comes out to about $913 per square foot. The two developments that have been built out here in the last couple of years have been one called Waterline, which is down in the Brickyard Cove area, and it totally sold out. And the resale prices for it are over $1 million. And then the other one is called Noma, which is not even near the waterfront. It's right on I-580. Noma stands for north of the waterfront, and it's right on I-580 on Wright Avenue.
There is a land at the 580 here.
And it's sold out. I mean, there's a market demand for housing in Richmond. Just in the last 3 years, the housing market in Richmond has skyrocketed. You know, like 3 years ago, the median price of a home in Richmond was about $550,000. Now it's approaching $800,000. So, you know, people are willing to pay a lot of money to live in this city.
Very good. We have some more questions in the chat. I'm going to read them to you. So do you know how the other two would have voted, referring to the council members that were absent that night?
Well, they've consistently supported the Point Molate plan. So I don't know what happened. You know, Nat Bates, I think he was out of state and he was probably having problems similar to mine. And Demlis, I understand, was at a candidate's night, not night, but he was at a candidate's interview somewhere, and that's why he didn't participate in the vote. But you know, everything involving Point Molate in the last you know couple of years has been a 4-3 vote. It's been the 4 RPA members against Nat and Demlis and me. And I can read these questions. I'll just read them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so the next one is what is the approximate dollar amounts that Upstream and SunCal are out of pocket at this time? Well, that's hard to say. I don't think anybody really knows. I would say Upstream is probably around $10 million. And SunCal probably in the same, they might be in the same ballpark. So between the two of them, maybe as much as $20 million. And I don't, you know, they're not prepared to leave that on the table. They're going to go to court. And the next one is, this is from Karen Fenton. What is the projected date for SunCal to complete the development, and how would traffic problems be handled? Well, SunCal has projected that that they will not actually be in a position to start selling homes until 3 to 5 years from now. And of course, they'll sell them as fast as they can sell them. You know, the traffic problem is kind of a red herring. I don't think anybody's really provided a lot of evidence that there's a fatal flaw traffic problem. You know, we all know that there is congestion on the Richmond Santa Fe Bridge in the weekday and in the morning when people are commuting to Marin. I mean, that's a fact. So if somebody say lives at ends up living at Point Molate and they are going anywhere but Marin County, they're not going to have a problem. You know, it's no problem going east. If they live in Marin, if they have to get to Marin County early in the morning, they're going to have the same problem any of us have. And that problem is, at some point, it's going to be resolved. I'm a member of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and I was very heavily involved in the program for RM3, which is the Regional Measure 3, which is being challenged in court, but it'll come eventually. I got $75 million put into RM3 to pay for measures at the Richmond-Sanderfeld Bridge to reduce congestion there. And there are also other plans to do it. These things take a while, but the congestion on the bridge is going to get resolved at some point. It'll probably get resolved before Point Malate's built out. And, just for comparison, Point Molate right now is entitled for, I think, somewhere around a couple of thousand residential units. Treasure Island is entitled for 8,000 dwelling units, and it has one way in and one way out. And you don't hear anybody talking about that. They've got some options. They're going to have ferry service, and Point Molate can also have ferry service eventually if it needs it. So, these are all red herrings that the anti-Point Molate crowd keeps throwing out there. They're the same things. They're throwing out one way in, one way out. How are we going to get out of there in case of a fire? How about the hawks and the eagles? How about the eelgrass? And these things are all resolved in the CEQA review, and the court upheld that and dismissed the challenge. So it's all old news. They're not really problems, but the opponents keep throwing them up there like they just discovered them. Okay, let me keep going here.
Thank you.
Here's another one. Let's see. Was one of the consultants that did the analysis that noted it works from a budget standpoint affiliated with SunCal? Not really. What happened was when SunCal first proposed the community facilities district, they had to do their own economic analysis, and they provided that to the city. And then the city retained a third party firm to do a peer review of SunCal's analysis, and they reviewed it and said that it was credible. And then since then, the city has actually retained yet another firm to do a totally independent analysis. So I think the short answer is that the economic analysis is ultimately it's not one done by SunCal. It's done by the city's independent third party consultant.
I have a couple of questions if you're done answering those questions.
You guys don't mind, that's the wine. I'm
Enjoy it.
had a hard day today.
So they say that if there are no buyers for the houses because of the taxes being so high, the infrastructure, I assume is something like Melrose tax, the financing district, then it would go bankrupt and the costs would be on the city. What actually happens? How much cost are we talking about? The infrastructure, how much is it per house? I mean, what percentage of the price of the house? How reasonable or pragmatic is it?
Well, I don't, I don't have all the details off the top of my head, but I think for a community facilities district, they said over and over that there's a statutory limit of 2% of the value of the property that can be paid into a community facilities district. And that's not a whole lot. This kind of thing happens all the time. Developments all over the country are the infrastructure is financed with community facilities districts, and in fact in Richmond, a lot of the infrastructure at Marina Bay was financed with a community facilities district. So this is really no big deal.
And sorry, how much is it costing the city, the whole thing, in terms of attorney cost?
Well, when the city entered into an agreement with SunCal. SunCal was on the hook to pay all of the city's legal fees. So they have been in the millions of dollars, and SunCal is obligated to reimburse the city. That's the legal fees for defending the lawsuits, challenging the project, the legal fees for the city evaluating and drafting the agreements and all that. So originally the city was not going to have to pay any of that. We have a problem now that, and of course the quid pro quo was that the city had to cooperate with SunCal in moving the project forward. But now that the city has become an adversary to SunCal, SunCal has a good argument that they should not have to reimburse all those attorney's fees. And I suspect that perhaps they're probably not going to do it. So so what the city's doing now is it's going to cost the city millions and millions of dollars. There's just no way around it.
Karen has a couple of questions. Before we go to Karen, my last question is there any hope to revive the original plan for retail performing arts casino project you initially talked about?
Well, probably not. There is a scenario where it could happen, and it goes something like this. As a part of their move to put a casino in there, the Gitaville tribe, which is located up in Sonoma County right now, they had to show a historic or ancestral connection to the land, and they hired some consultant to write all that up, and they submitted it to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is in charge of issuing what they call an Indian lands decision, and basically they make a decision whether or not there's sufficient evidence that this particular Indian tribe has a connection with the land, and they declined to do that. Now, what we do know is that decision is not irrevocable, and that the tribe could in fact resubmit their application, and it could be approved. And if it's approved, and if we go down this route of Upstream and the tribe buying the property for $400, they could put it in trust, which means to the tribe, which means that it is no longer, among other things, it's no longer subject to regulatory authority of the city and the state. And they could reapply for their Indian lands designation. They could get they could get it approved. And once it's approved, they could put a casino there. So there is a scenario, it may be a little far-fetched, but there is a scenario where we could end up with a casino there now. And I'm looking at a couple of other questions here. Question: have you given up fighting this issue in your minority position? No, I haven't given up at all. I frankly think that it's all going to get worked out at some point. I think there's so many. I think the legal issues all accrue to either SunCal or the tribe and Upstream, and that in the end they'll prevail, and the city will be the big loser. And then she also asked, is anybody negotiating between the parties? Not that I know of, because at this point in time, I'm not sure there's anything to negotiate. And then the next question I see on here, to add on to Karen's question, is there an opportunity to potentially consider different locations of the housing previously impacted areas with the developer and work with the folks interested in conservation to avoid impacts to the most sensitive resources. The fact is that historically, Point Molate was, at least in the last 120 years, has not been some kind of pristine, nature preserve type area. It has been the location of extremely heavy industry, particularly in the first half of the 20th century. It was extensively quarried. They built Winehaven there back in 1907, and it was the largest winery in the world. The Navy took it over in 1940 and turned it into the primary Pacific fuel depot for the Bay Area, and riddled the hillside with underground tanks and built all kinds of infrastructure there. So Point Molate has been substantially changed over the years by industrialization, and all of the development areas in the Point Molate plan are all areas that have been substantially disturbed and changed in the past. So the idea that somehow there's some place to put housing that doesn't impact sensitive resources, there really are no sensitive resources out there in the development areas. That's why they were chosen. They're all areas that were quarried or torn up by the Navy in the past.
Thank you. I had previously received an email question that somebody said she's very interested to see Point Molate. She's hearing a lot about it, has written the city council, but she's never visited. Are there any tours available of Point Molate?
Well, first of all, you can just drive out there if you want. You can drive right through it, and you can go to the beach. The beach in Point Molate is a city park, so you can go out there any day. I think it's closed at night, but you can go out there anytime during the day and recreate. And you can drive through Point Molate anytime. You can't actually go in the buildings that are there or go up into the open space. But if there's a group of people who would like a tour of Point Molate, I can arrange it. So, if you get half a dozen or a dozen people there who want a tour, let me know and I can arrange it.
That'd be wonderful. I'm sure some people would love that. I would love it. I have one more question for you. I heard in the news that Ohlone people actually have done DNA, and there are 9 people present of the tribe and they're about to get the status. Is it going to change the equation in any way? Because they were the people who were here first.
Well, the short answer is no. The issue of Native American sites at Point Molate was brought up as a part of the EIR challenge, and the judge dismissed it. There's been extensive research and some exploratory archaeological work out there. The location of the Shell Mounds has been well established for a long time. Most of them have been degraded. I mean, they've been because of all the development there over the years, you wouldn't recognize them as shell mounds anymore. They've been leveled and spread out. So, but it's kind of interesting there. There are multiple bands of people who represent themselves as being descendants of the Ohlone people, and the one that's been the most vocal is a group called the Lijan Band, Lijan, and they've been very vocal about Point Molate. The band that recently that you read about, and I read about it too, where there was a DNA link is not the Legion band, it's a different one. And, the Legion band has kind of been, they're a very activist group of people. And the other groups are, they're less vocal and less activist. But I don't think this new discovery has any impact on Point Molate. I mean, it's been well established that there are archaeological Native American sites at Point Molate. They've been located. They've been mapped. None of the development areas impact them. Most of them are right along the shoreline, and they're going to be in the area where there's a shoreline park.
Very good. Thank you very much. There seem to be no more questions. I really appreciate your coming and joining us today, Mayor Bud. I would like to invite you again on other issues. We have a couple of minutes left. I don't know if I have the permission to ask you a question off topic about the other park, or you want to end it here. You're welcome to do that. Is it okay to ask? Or
Yeah.
okay, about the El Sobrante Creekside Community Park. So we've been asking Supervisor Joya to do it. He says the county does not have any money. We are going to have a special measure on the ballot to have tax it, to purchase it and maintain it. The issue is there's a tire shop that wants to buy it. So we need to urgently buy it. We need $1 million. And Chevron says, we asked Chevron actually that give us some money to compensate for the pollution in the area. Resident will have access to the park. They said we're already giving money. I don't know, $30 million to the city. Go ask the city for that. We told them it's not exactly city, it's the county. They said as long as the city residents use it, you qualify for it. I would like to ask for your support and see how we can work it out together so we can have that problem. If we get the property, we can get grants for developing it. We can get tax measure for maintaining it. We can do everything. The point is, it's the only public access point to San Pablo Creek. We don't know anything about the health of the creek. I mean, it's going to change the face and identity of the community. It will make a hub. It will make a focal point. It's next to the library. Bank of America has closed. We can turn it into a community center. There is no foot traffic on San Pablo Dam Road. It brings foot traffic. It will help with business development, economic development of the area. So we're asking for your support. Show us the way, please.
Well, it sounds like a good idea. But again, it's in Contra Costa, it's in unincorporated Contra Costa County. It's not within the city of Richmond. And while the city of Richmond could certainly be supportive, I think that any money for it is going to have to come from, some other source than the city of Richmond. And as you said, money is the big issue right now. Presumably you could purchase a site for $1 million. So if you can find $1 million, maybe the site gets purchased. But that's not the end of it. It costs money to develop a park, and it costs money to maintain a park. And both of those would be on the county to do. So I don't have a silver bullet. I mean, I think if people want to park there, I'm fully supportive of trying to do it.
Thank you.
But again, I just don't have a silver bullet on how to get there.
Thank you. We'll continue our discussion. There's one last question for you from Harpreet. Harpreet, go ahead, please.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, Sohaila, for putting this together. Mayor, you mentioned early on in the beginning you wanted to talk a little bit more about RPA. Was that just in the context of how decisions were made, or did you still have a mindset about talking about the RPA and going into the future?
Well, it's no secret that we have a deeply, deeply divided city council right now. And we have four council members who are card carrying members of the RPA. and we have 3 council members who are not. And on a lot of important issues like Point Molate, you know, we have a 4-3 split, and you know, 4 votes is more than 3 votes. So they win. They win. And I think it's really unfortunate. I mean, I don't think the RPA really represents the majority of people in Richmond, and but you know, they've been very successful in getting elected and holding power, and I sincerely hope that either in this next election or sometime in the future that we get a more representative city council. But as you know, I'm termed out, so I leave office the middle of January 2023. That gives me about it gives me about nine and a half months, and I have no choice. It's not my choice to retire from politics, but maybe it's a good thing. So I hope some new leaders emerge. I hope that maybe Sohaila gets elected and becomes a more representative city council member of Richmond, and I hope some other people get elected. And you know, there's nothing wrong with having people with differing viewpoints on the city council. We've always had it, but you know, on the major issues, the city council has always been able to come together, and they've made some important compromises. And you don't see that anymore. You know, compromise is just not something the RPA does.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Anything else you would like to tell the community?
No, but I appreciate this opportunity. As I said before, I'm just amazed at the amount of inaccurate information that's floating around there about Point Molate, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to tell people what's really going on. And this is March 29th. This is National Vietnam Veterans Day, so go out and celebrate. You know, I'm a Vietnam veteran. 52 years ago now. And so is Vern Whitmore, who's my chief of staff in my office. So we celebrated a little bit today and had a drink, and I urge you to do the same.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bott. We really appreciate your time, all the information, and we plan to have you here more often with the community.
Happy anytime.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Okay.